We'll get started. We're multi-streaming because this conversation deserves to be had all over the globe. And we're waiting for YouTube to fire up. One quick second. And there we go. We're live on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. My name is Robert Gruler. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I work with the R&R Law Group in Scottsdale. I'm the host of a program that you're watching right now called Watching the Watchers Live. Watching the Watchers is a show that we do to monitor police misconduct, judicial misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, any misconduct that's going on in the criminal justice system. We want to talk about it. We want to shine some light, shine some transparency on the things that you may not ordinarily see. Lately, we've been talking a lot about Ahmaud Arbery. This is a story that's had national news. I did an in-depth video on this last week. So today what we're going to do is talk about the bad arguments that we've seen. Last week we did a deep dive. We talked a lot about the facts, a lot about the specifics of what happened. And in a short 7 days, we've had a number of different new videos be released. We've had a number of different angles, new arguments are coming up. And so today what we're going to do, since we know really the facts, we're going to dissect a lot of the different arguments that I've seen from a number of different people. So we've got a lot of clips, screen clips, and today the name of the show is Ahmaud Arbery's case, Bad Arguments Debunked. So we're going to dive into that. We've got a lot to get through today. Before we do that, if you're not a regular subscriber here, go ahead and subscribe because we're going to continue to follow these stories. This is a new show and we want to cover these types of things. There's a lot of this type of stuff going on throughout the country. And so to be a part of this conversation and to be part of really the change that we want this conversation to lead to, hit the subscribe button. As an aside, quick announcement. My book just came out. This is fresh off the press. This came from Amazon today. It's called Beginning to Winning, How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. So I don't want to plug it. I'm super excited about it, so I am going to plug it. But if you're interested in the book, if you've been specifically charged with a crime, check it out on Amazon. All right, so let's get right into the meat and potatoes of the show. We've got some seriously bad arguments that have been going on all throughout the internet, all throughout the cable news channels. There's a lot of people who are upset about this case, and they're sort of drawing lines in the sand. So you've got on the one side, you've got the sort of the conservative right who says, well, we've got a right to police our neighborhoods, and so this was justified. And on the other side, you've got sort of the far left that is saying this is pure racism. These are white supremacists. This was a modern day lynching, and this is white supremacy active in America. So you've got these two kind of factions, as I talked about last time, and I'll remind you again. My filter, my view on the world and how this all works, we're dealing with really bad popo, bad police officers, bad prosecutors, people in the criminal justice system who are really committing malfeasance and major violations of ethical rules and all sorts of things. So that's my lens. I'm not going to jump into either one of those two different camps. There are some arguments I'm going to nuke from one side of the camp and others from the other one that we're just going to equal opportunity debunking going on here today. So let's take a look at what the first really and the most common argument that we see out there. And it goes something like this. So this is a screenshot from an anonymous individual who basically says that the shooting, everything that happened, everything that you saw in the video, everything that McMichaels did and that Ahmaud Arbery did, it's all justified because it was self-defense. So this is the argument. It says, this is from a Skeptical Enlightenment. This was a Facebook comment that I saw. It says, knowing his background makes it easier to believe what you see on the video of the shooting. Arbery started the fight that led to his death. So Arbery started the fight that led to his death. Arbery became, I don't know why I keep saying Arbery because that's not his name, actually. It's Arbery. But Arbery became the aggressor when he was approached and grabbed the gun. The first shot wasn't fired until after his hand was on the gun. And it's even possible that the first shot was fired because he tried to jerk the shotgun away. All right, so we saw that last week when we were going through the letter from the prosecutor Barnhill, who sent that over to the police chief, basically saying, we don't have any probable cause here. We're not going to file charges against the McMichaels. He goes through painstaking efforts to twist himself into a pretzel and kind of make that same argument. He says, well, the trigger on a shotgun, it can only moves an eighth of an inch and then it fires. I have a shotgun. I know how it works. So his argument is that basically the McMichaels didn't pull the trigger, that Arbery pulled the gun, which pulled the trigger. So, and he spends a full paragraph. It's like this long. I covered it all in the video. We're not going to cover it again here today, but it is the argument that there was no intentional shooting of the gun, which is ridiculous because the bullets, 3 shots were fired from the shotgun. So did Arbery shoot himself 3 times? No, that's somebody on the other end of the gun who's pulling the trigger, okay, to shoot him. So it's a ridiculous argument, that part by itself. But I want to be clear here that when we're going through these different arguments, we're not taking him in chunks. This is the problem with how people argue on the internet and in real life. They start throwing everything under the sun into the same argument, into the same discussion. So what we want to do here we want to take them one by one and break them down. Okay, so on this particular issue, we want to talk about self-defense, we want to talk about who the aggressor was, and we want to piece it all together in a way to show you, right? And where do we do that? Where can we get the most objective evidence? Everybody who's on the right side of the camp is going to have their version. Everybody on the left side is going to have their version. But who was there? Who was responding to it? Really, the best information that we have comes from the police report, because it takes information that came directly out of the McMichaels' mouths and put it in writing. And it's not really a long police report. It's like a page and a half. But I want to highlight the section that we're going to cover. Okay, specifically, we're talking about this person's claim, Skeptical Enlightenment's claim, that Arbery started the fight that led to his death. Arbery became the aggressor when he was approached and grabbed the gun. So it's actually Arbery, but he's saying, he obviously got the name wrong. But these are the 2 points we want to address. Was he the aggressor? Did he start the fight? Because everybody is saying that if he did that, then the shots are justified. So if he was the aggressor, the shots are justified. That's their basis. That's their conclusion. All right, so let's take a look at what really happened. Was he really the aggressor? Let's sort of recreate the events that we have in front of us from the police report. So as a quick reminder, I want to read this real quickly. This is from the police report. Now, I've got 3 different sections here that have been highlighted and pointing to 3 different streets. Okay, McMichaels stated that he and Travis got in the truck and drove down to Satia toward Burford Drive. McMichaels stated that when they arrived at the intersection of Satia Drive and Holmes Drive, they saw the unidentified male running down towards Burford Drive. McMichael then stated Travis drive down Burford Drive and attempted to cut off the male. Some bad grammar there. McMichaels stated the unidentified male turned around and began running back the direction from which he came, and Roddy jumped into the bed Roddy attempted to block him. He was unsuccessful. McMichaels stated he then jumped into the bed of the truck, and Travis continued to Holmes in an attempt to intercept him. All right, so that's a lot, right? There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of activities, a lot of different streets, a lot of different names, a lot of individuals who were involved. And so they're saying here, we're reading that, and most people are just glossing over that. Like, that's not a big deal. They only are taking a look, the skeptical Enlightenment person is only taking a look at what they see on that 5, 7 second, 15-second video where Arbery gets shot. And it looks like he just kind of is on the sidewalk, and he just lunges in front of the car, the white truck, and goes after McMichaels. And that's when the whole interaction starts. But that is totally out of context. That's not even close to really what happened. That comes up on the very tail end of the scene, as is evident from the police report. Okay, they didn't just pull up on this on Ahmaud and say, hey, can we just talk to you real quick? This was a big, long sequence of events. It happened very quickly. It happened only over a matter of minutes. But let's break it down, and then you can decide who is the aggressor. Who was the person who started this whole thing? So let's take a look at it, all right? I want to jump into a map. This is Brunswick. This is Satilla Shores in Georgia. And a lot of this activity is going to be taking place right around here. So as a reminder, we're going to go through the police report. We're going to take that quick paragraph that's short, like 6 sentences. We're going to break it down step by step, and we're going to piece it together on the map, and then you tell me who the aggressor was. All right, so let's dive into it. So we've got this map, and when we go to the police report, we see one of the very first things that is said is that McMichaels saw him hauling ass down Satia Drive towards Burford Drive, and they go inside to get guns. That's the first part of the police report. So that's presumably right here, okay, going down Satia towards Burford Drive, which is this road right here. Next, we see that the McMichaels drove down Satia Drive and towards Buford Drive. So here's Ahmaud running down the street. We get the McMichaels who follow him over. We go and we see from the police report that the McMichaels arrive right here in number 3 at the intersection of Satia Drive and Holmes Drive, and they saw the unidentified male running down Buford. So now Ahmaud's over here, and both McMichaels are right here. Reading the police report further, Travis then drove down Buford. I'm going to call it Buford. I don't know how to pronounce it. Down Buford and attempted to cut him off. So that's number 4. So again, these are the McMichaels who are just in pursuit of Arbery. Number 5, the unidentified male turns around and goes back the direction from which he came. So there's a lot happening right here. So Roddy, who was the neighbor, parks his car here or attempts to block him, and Arbery does a U-turn right here. So Arbery's in the green, and he starts heading back towards Holmes Road. Okay, so we've got one U-turn. We're on our basically our 3rd street, and we've got one U-turn. We've got the McMichaels following him. We've got Roddy who blocks off this roadway, and Arbery turns back around. Next, Travis continues on Holmes Road, and he's going north here, and then they block Arbery, and he turns back around and heads back towards Holmes Road, towards Satia, and then of course we see that the police report says that the McMichaels said that Arbery violently attacks Travis. And so that's happening right here at the final moment. So this is the final couple seconds that we see from that cell phone footage that was recorded. I think it was a dash cam footage from the vehicle that was following Arbery. So you tell me, I mean, that's a matter of minutes. And this is somebody, in my mind, who is being chased by at least 3 other individuals. There was another individual who called the police initially. We're going to get there in a minute. But you've got these 3 different people with guns running around the neighborhood, chasing Ahmaud down multiple streets. He goes down Satia, and he crosses into Buford. He's blocked off by Roddy. Roddy tries to stop him, turns him back around. He goes north. He tries to get away on Holmes, and then he comes back on number 7. Okay, and that's where the incident happens, and that's where he is shot and killed. So, okay, all of that being said, let's focus only on that argument that Arbery was the aggressor. Does that look like an aggressor to you? So let's leave out all of the other facts, because then people are going to start saying, well, you know, he's got a criminal record. He's got a criminal history. He's somebody who was arrested for shoplifting. He brought a gun to high school. He got tased, you know, whatever. He was in that person's house. That's all irrelevant to this question. The only issue here, was he the aggressor? Did he attack the McMichaels? From your own police report, from your own understanding, if this was you wandering around a neighborhood, whether you're jogging or not, or exercising or not, or poking around a house or not, and this happens to you, do you think that you are the aggressor in this situation when you have 3 guys with guns and multiple trucks running you around the neighborhood? Who is the aggressor there? So now they get him cornered, and now he responds. Who was the aggressor there? It's plainly obvious to me that he was not the aggressor. Okay, he has been chased now on 3 streets for a number of minutes by a couple guys. He has no idea who they are or what they're doing. In my mind, I could be putting words in his mind. Maybe he knew them. Maybe he recognized them from when McMichaels was a former officer or investigator. Maybe he knew that this was a cop. Who knows? Does it matter? No, because who was the aggressor here? There were 3 guys with weapons and trucks following him around the neighborhood, and he responded when he got cornered. So if there's going to be an argument of self-defense, Arbery gets that benefit of the doubt. He has people with guns in his face who are not cops, who have no basis for a lawful citizen's arrest, which we're going to get to. But only on this issue, who was the aggressor when you look at this map? Seems to me like Arbery's running away, and the McMichaels are chasing him down. They're doing everything they can to track this guy down. So they are the aggressors. Now, I've seen many people with that's the same opinion, because only the only bit that they saw was the last 15 seconds before Arbery is killed. But when you put it in context, This guy was being chased around the neighborhood by 3 guys with guns. You tell me who the aggressor is. All right? That's a very bad argument. Ahmaud Arbery was not the aggressor. The McMichaels did not have any basis of self-defense. They were chasing Ahmaud around the neighborhood, and then they shot and killed him. It's a bad argument. And ultimately, this type of question would be up to a jury to decide, a fact-finding jury to decide that, and they would be the ones who could come to that conclusion. If this was their kid, who do you think that they would think that this person was being the aggressor? I don't. Doesn't sound like an aggressor to me. All right, enough with that argument. The next argument that I want to cover is this idea that McMichaels, Greg McMichaels, the father, is a super cop. He's somebody who was, very experienced. We're going to hear this from a guy I follow very frequently. I enjoy his content. He has this argument that he's a super cop. He's somebody who's very experienced and highly trained, and he knew how to sniff out a bad guy. Okay, let's dissect that argument. So is McMichaels a super cop? Does he deserve the benefit of the doubt? Should we give him some leeway and default in his favor because of his time, because of his experience on the force as an investigator, as a police officer? Let's take a look at this actual argument. So this comes from a guy I'm actually a big fan of. I like Stefan Molyneux. I like his show a lot. I subscribe to his channel. And when all of this was unfolding, I was very curious to see what his thoughts were on this whole topic. And then I was a little bit shocked that he took the position that he did. Now, Stefan is a little bit contrarian. He likes to take the other side of certain issues. He's a very sharp guy, and he's very, very talented at what he does. But I just think he's totally wrong. He's totally out of his element here. And I'd love to talk to him if he sees this. Hopefully he's not too mad at me for playing this clip. But let me show you Stefan Molyneux. He's got a big channel, like 900,000, almost 1 million subscribers. So a lot of people are listening to his arguments. He carries a lot of weight. And let's take a look at what he said specifically about Ahmaud's case.
We have to divide the sequences into the legal and the illegal, just as we did with Michael Brown and Darren Wilson, just as we did with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. What is legal and what is illegal? It is legal to drive down the road and demand that someone stop. It is legal to make a citizen's arrest. It is legal to be armed while doing so. And certainly, Gregory McMichael knew the law deeply and well at this point. He had been a cop, an investigator, a detective for many decades. Now, the idea that Ahmaud Arbery was unarmed is false. Listen, when you're grabbing at someone's gun and trying to use it to shoot them with and shoot their father with, you're no longer unarmed. He was not unarmed. He was grappling for a weapon, and he may very well have shot the weapon himself. He was not unarmed.
Okay, so what we have right there is what's called mind reading. So there's another guy I follow, his name's Scott Adams, brilliant guy, huge fan of his work. And he says that when people are making arguments with one another, and he uses this, he says people start trying to read other people's minds. And that's a really bad way to conduct an argument. It's a logical fallacy. It's not right. And so Stefan right there is doing a lot of mind reading. He's looking at Ahmaud and he's saying, wait a minute, he's pulling the gun. So I know in my mind that he's going to take that gun and he's going to kill Travis and he's going to kill Gregory and he's just going to cause mayhem and wreak havoc across the entire neighborhood, which is mind reading. There's no evidence that he was going to do that. There's no indication from his prior arrests, from his prior experience, from anything that he said, from any evidence that's in front of us that he was going to do that. There's nothing that I've seen. If somebody can show me something like that, or there's a recording where he says, I'm going to take this shotgun and kill you, white people or something, then I'll revise my statement. But from the facts that are in front of us, there's just no evidence to show that that is happening. So he's doing a lot of mind reading, which is unfortunate. And you can't do that in criminal law. You can't just start kind of imputing people's motives to them. You have to have some facts, and those facts have to get into evidence. So it's just inaccurate to say that we can presume Ahmaud was going to do what he was going to do. We have no basis for that. The other big problem with Stefan's position here is he's sort of saying that we should defer over to Gregory McMichael because he's been a part of law enforcement. He's been an investigator for so long. I covered this last week, and I want to just reiterate it. I don't have the slides, but there were about 2 periods of time when Gregory McMichaels was a valid police officer, and then he got kind of demoted down into an investigator, which is a totally different thing. So people think that they're the same. They're really not. An investigator doesn't have the same powers as a police officer does, meaning they don't have the ability to make arrests. They can't, do certain things that a cop can do. And it's typically a demotion. It's basically, when you see in the movies on Lethal Weapon, give me your badge and your gun. Okay, well, they're going to keep you employed, but you're not a law enforcement officer anymore. You're just an investigator. You get to go file subpoenas or get subpoenas from the legal team and go interview people and make record requests and go down and view samples and do all of those things and then write a conclusion that you're going to turn back over to the prosecutor's office. So it's really a demotion. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Gregory McMichael's timeline is he's a valid officer, badge and gun. He drops down to an investigator, drops back up to an officer, and then drops back down to an investigator. Now, investigators may not say it's a downward motion. They may say, I'm not a cop, and that's a good thing. So maybe it's up or down. I'm not trying to rip on investigators. We use many of them. But my point is that he's not a validly licensed, certified police officer who can make the same arrest as somebody who is. And so why is that? So has anybody asked that question? I have not seen any evidence. When you are a police officer, there's a case, it's called Brady, and it says that this is a Supreme Court case, and it's a little bit more complicated. I'm going to boil it down, but basically it says if the government has evidence that is what's called exculpatory, meaning it's tending to show your guilt or your innocence, or kind of dismiss your guilt and show your innocence, that information has to be provided to the defense. Okay, so let's say I'm representing somebody on a DUI case. The prosecutor has all of the cards. They have the file. They have the officer's personnel file. They know what the officer who made the arrest, whether he was a good cop, a bad cop, whether he's been disciplined before, whether he's got a history of reprimands or sanctions, whether he's been had multiple complaints filed against him. There's a case in the Supreme Court called Brady that says that all of that information about that officer has to be divulged to the defense. We're representing somebody who's been charged with a DUI. We want to know if there's a bad cop involved in the case. We want to know that. What's in that personnel file? It's called a Brady file. And I've made many videos about this. A big part of why I do Watching the Watchers in general is because the government, the prosecutor's offices, and all of the politicians, they don't want to ever tell us about the bad cops. Or they do, they just a little blurb here and there, but then they go through the back rooms and they say, that really wasn't that bad, so we're not going to put him on the Brady list so that defense attorneys know to ask about that cop. They don't want to tell us. They want to just sweep it all under the rug, and they do what's called an in-camera review. They talk to the judge, and the judge says, yeah, you're right. That's not really worthwhile. The defense doesn't need to know that. They don't go on the Brady list. We don't get any of the exculpatory information that we can then use in the defense of our clients. All right, so that's a long way of saying, what is in Gregory McMichael's Brady file? What's in his personnel file? Why did he go from a licensed, perfectly uniform, validly certified police officer in Georgia down to an investigator, back up, and then back down again? What happened there? What's in that file? Was he disciplined? What do his disciplinary records look like? We have a lot of new video that's leaking out about Ahmaud Arbery. I'm going to get to some of those. We see that he was in a tasing incident. We see that he was in a shoplifting incident. Everybody's spamming his criminal record all over the place because they want to alter the discussion. They want to shift the narrative here to say this was a really bad guy. So the police departments, with all their body cams and all of their police reports, they are scouring those things with a comb, and they're releasing these videos to say, look, Arbery, he had another interaction with cops and another interaction with cops. I'm going to explain why that's such a dumb thing to do and why that really hurts their case shortly. But my point here for this one is that Gregory McMichaels is not a super cop. He is not somebody with sixth sense, Spider-Man senses who should be, patrolling the neighborhood and organizing these gangs of roving, bands of ex-law enforcement people to go enact justice in their neighborhood. They should have called the actual police, the people who actually are certified and can make arrests. They did that, and the cops showed up there, but not before they killed Ahmaud Arbery. So the idea that he's a super cop is a very bad argument. The idea that we should default and give him the benefit of the doubt because he is a former cop is horrendous. Okay, we don't know anything about this guy. We don't know what his personnel file looks like. It may be perfectly clean. I have no idea. But why was that happening? Why was he a cop, an investigator, a cop, an investigator? What was going on there? He was there for 30-something years or 20-something years, a long time, decades. Did he not have any complaints? Did he not do anything wrong? He probably did. So we want to know what it says. Now, if we know what it says, is that information going to actually get into court? It's very difficult to say. There's a rule. We're going to talk about it. It's called Rule 403. Does the we may not have time to talk about it today, but there's a rule under the Federal Rules of Evidence. Rule 403, does the probative value of the information outweigh the prejudicial effect of the information? So in other words, if the judge let information in about Gregory McMichaels' case, if that went into court, what would the value of that be? Would it provide more information or would it provide more harm? If it provides more harm than it does information, we're going to keep that information out. If it doesn't, if it provides more value than it does harm, we're going to let that information in. Okay, so that's the rule. So I would love to know more about all of that, whether or not he does have a personnel file, whether he has any other discipline. I know there's a lot of talk that he may have investigated or he was involved in Ahmaud Arbery's case at some point in time. We just don't know. But to give him, sort of a pass just because he's a former cop is a bad argument. It just doesn't hold any water. We don't know enough about it. And even if he was an excellent cop, still doesn't give him the right to do what he did. So that's a bad argument. And I was sorry to hear that from Stefan. All right. Next very bad argument that we're going to see. There's a difference when you're reading case law, or you're reading statutes, or you go to law school and you have to start dissecting what the language says. There's a concept of different statutes being what's called conjunctive or disjunctive. Okay, and these are fancy ways of saying you either read the whole thing together or you read the whole thing separately. Conjunctive means it's all, you read it together. Disjunctive means you read them separately and you can kind of piecemeal them, take them apart from one another. All right, so this is what a lot of people are saying. They're not using that language, but they're reading the statute from the citizen's arrest statute, and they're only wanting to focus on little bits and pieces of the statute. They want to say, well, we're going to pick that one because that serves my argument, but we're not going to take that first sentence because that doesn't support my argument. We're going to separate them and pull them apart when really they should be read together. So the next bad argument is that the statute is disjunctive. Okay, here's the statute. It's the citizen's arrest statute. It's 17-460, grounds for arrest for the citizen's arrest. A private person may arrest an offender if the offense is committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. We spent a lot of time on that last week. It's very important. If the offense is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempting to escape, a private person may arrest him upon reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion. Okay, so there's a lot there, right? And we can really break that down. But people are saying that that he was fleeing, so they're using this language. They're saying he was fleeing, attempting to escape, or he was escaping or attempting to escape. So all they needed then was reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion. So that's the language that I've seen in a lot of these comments. Wait a minute. The statute says he was fleeing. And if he's fleeing, all we need is reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion to make that arrest. So they're using that as their in to say that what we saw on the map of the McMichaels following Ahmaud all over the place was justified because they had reasonable suspicion to think that he was committing a crime, that he was trespassing, that he was, stealing things from people's cars or doing something to break the law. I haven't really heard a good articulation of what law he was breaking on this day, but apparently the people who are on that side of the aisle are saying that there was something there that gave them enough reasonable suspicion or probable grounds of suspicion in order to effectuate the arrest. Well, the problem with that whole argument is that this statute is not disjunctive. Okay, you have to read it in total. So you have to say a private person may arrest an offender if committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. And if it is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempting to escape, you may use reasonable or probable grounds of suspicion. So you got to take that in totality, and you have to say, okay, was this first of all, was this a felony to begin with? The answer is no. I'm going to tell you about trespassing here on the next slide. But even if it were, do you think that the drafters of this statute intended to make it easier to arrest somebody for a felony than something lower? So in other words, if it's a misdemeanor, if it's a lower level offense, all you need is to see it, or somebody has to commit it in your presence or within your immediate knowledge. So that's a lower level of right. The threshold is low on that. All you have to do is see it or witness it, and then you can make the arrest. The standard is even lower for the second part of the statute, where they're saying all you need is reasonable suspicion or probable cause or reasonable grounds of suspicion, and then you can do it. So you don't even have to see it. You don't have to have anything. You don't have to be involved in it. You don't have to even be in the same zip code. If you've got reasonable grounds of suspicion, then you can just go make any arrest you want. So that's the standard that people are choosing to tack their teeth into. But in red, when you read the whole statute in total, it just doesn't make sense. You have to read it. If he's escaping, if it's a felony, if the felony was committed within their presence or immediately within their knowledge, okay, that is the statute. It does not serve us to say that that all of this is thrown out the window if these two conditions are present. So it's almost like a math equation, and you want to add these pieces together, and you have to add them all up to get a total understanding of what this statute says. So this is complicated statutory interpretation, statutory construction, but the point is you don't get to pull out pieces of the statute and just argue the bits and pieces that fit your narrative. So in other words, people are saying he had a reasonable suspicion. They've seen a black guy in a white t-shirt around the neighborhood. Ahmaud Arbery was a black guy with a white t-shirt. Therefore, they have enough reasonable suspicion. That makes no sense at all. So you just go and be an officer wherever you want. You can just say, well, I kind of think I got reasonable suspicion about that guy committing a crime. I didn't see it. I don't know if it actually happened, but I do have some reasonable suspicion on that. Is that what a citizen's arrest is for? No, we talked about this at length last week. I explained why we have the citizen's arrest statutes. Why are these things put in place? It's so that when somebody is committing an immediate crime right in front of your face, you can go take action on it, and you're not going to have a certain level of liability. You're going to, the law is going to have your back. If you see a bank robber robbing a bank and you're standing there and you tackle him, we've got your back. You're seeing a felony, it happened right in front of you. You're not a trained prosecutor. You're not a trained cop. So you don't really know what the law is, and you don't really know what the standards are. But if you do, if you do interfere and you try to stop that crime, and there's enough to articulate that you had a reasonable suspicion or probable grounds of suspicion, then we're going to say that was okay. You could have gone and stopped that guy because it was based on the first part of the statute. It's based on the first sentence, committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. So the idea that people want to say that the standard here is probable cause or reasonable grounds, it's a bad argument. It's not what the statute says. So you can keep, people pick that argument out, and then they base their entire argument on that. They pull that one language out, and then they say, well, because the statute says reasonable grounds, probable grounds for suspicion, I'm going to base my argument on that. Well, it's on a faulty foundation, so it doesn't hold any water. It's another bad argument. The statute is not disjunctive. It's conjunctive. You have to read the whole thing together. All right. So that is a lot of the legal stuff that I wanted to cover. There's a little bit more of it. Let's take a look at the next bad argument. Was Ahmaud Arbery actually trespassing? So that's what people are saying, that he was trespassing. Therefore, it was a felony. Therefore, the McMichaels had probable grounds to conduct the citizen's arrest. Therefore, they had the right to chase him around the entire neighborhood. And when he stepped back into Travis was justified as a matter of self-defense to pull the shotgun trigger 3 times and kill him. So you see what's happening here. They're stacking up dominoes. And what we're doing here is just knocking them down. Okay, if you can break that chain, if you can say Yeah, but this one actually didn't happen that way. That domino is not going to hit the next domino, and it's going to break up the entire argument. So we're just going through it piece by piece. Was he the aggressor? No. Was he a super cop? No. Was he somebody with reasonable suspicion? No. Does the statute support their basis for that? No. Okay, how about the next one? Was he illegally trespassing? So this is what everybody's saying. They're saying he's illegally trespassing because he went into somebody's house and he was poking around. And really, is that a crime? Okay, let's take a look. Let's take a look at the Georgia statutes. So we have a video here I want to just show you quickly. Or not. Let's see. Okay, no video there, but we're going to just jump right into the statute. All right. Okay, here is the statute from Georgia. So Georgia Code, Title 16, Crimes and Offenses, 16-7-21. A person commits the offense of criminal trespass when he or she intentionally damages any property of another without consent of that person, and the damage thereto is $500 or less. Okay, so when we talked about statutory construction, let me explain how to read this statute. Okay, and you have to just walk it through word by word. A person commits the offense of criminal trespass when he or she intentionally damages any property of another without consent of that person, and the damage thereto is $500 or less. That's the end of the first part of the statute. Okay, that's it. So so you have to do all of those things in order to be guilty of trespass for this part of it. There's another condition. You can also be charged with trespass if you do one of these things. Okay, let's focus on the first one. If they intentionally damage any property, did we see any damage at all in this case to any property? Even the surveillance footage of him walking around in the house, if that is him, on those prior preceding occasions, no claims of damage that I've ever seen. It wasn't taking anything, wasn't breaking anything. So on that part of the statute, it fails. There is no trespass there because there was no damage under around $500, and there's just no damage, period, at all. So that part of the statute fails. All right, well, what about the second part of it? Does he knowingly and maliciously interfere with the possession or the use of a property of another without consent of that person? So now we have to really dissect that. What does interfere mean? Maliciously interfere. Does he maliciously interfere with the possession of the property or the use of the property? Does he? If you walk into a house that's being built and nobody's in there and you don't damage anything, under this statute, did you knowingly and maliciously interfere with somebody else's possession of that? No. Nobody was there. Did he interfere maliciously and knowingly with the use of that property? No. Did he? Did he stop construction workers? Did he stop anybody from living there? Did he take something that was going to impact their livelihood? No, he didn't take anything. He's just walking around. So was that trespass? No, it wasn't. Not according to the statute. And people are still claiming that it was a trespass because he was in somebody else's house. Now, there are other statutes in other states where the law is a lot less serious than that. And this is just subsection A. There are other subsections that you can make an argument on. But the other part that I wanted to highlight here is that the person who commits the offense of criminal trespass shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Okay, it's not a felony. Here it is. A person who commits the offense of criminal trespass shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Misdemeanor. It's not even a felony. So let's add that one. Let's stack that domino up next to the other argument where they're saying, well, we only need reasonable suspicion because he was committing a felony of trespass. It's not even a felony here by Georgia's own code. First of all, it doesn't even meet the elements of trespass. Even if it did, it's not a felony. So that argument is it's not a good argument. I understand the logic behind it, but the law doesn't match the argument. It just doesn't. You can pull it up yourself if you want to read it. All right, so that's enough of that argument. All right, so he was trespassing, allegedly, they're claiming, which justified, all of the additional things that were going on. but not really. You know, those waters are those arguments aren't carrying water. They're not holding water. They're not carrying weight. So now what we're seeing over the last 7 days, ever since this story really caught fire, is we're seeing all of these different releases of videos. So we're seeing new videos of people from releasing his videos from he got tased, from shoplifting. We're going to run through some of those. So let me just kind of clip through them real quickly. And I want to point out something that was also ridiculous about these cops. Let's take a quick look at what we've got here. So, all right. Here is the other argument. Arbery's just a bad dude. He's just a bad guy. You know, he wasn't just jogging. He wasn't just out there getting some exercise. He was actually a pretty bad dude. And here's how they justified that. So they say, let's see.
Yeah, that was, he wouldn't let me search the car, but since he's gone now I was able to actually get up close to the car, and now I smell a little bit of burnt weed inside, but before I didn't have any reason for him to stop, so.
Did you let him go?
Yeah, he's out. He's in that coat walking down Townsend.
Okay.
He was very aggravated.
Malfunction?
Yeah, that was.
I tried to tase him.
You did try to tase him?
Yeah.
It got to the point where you had to tase
Well,
him?
it was, I didn't realize he'd already patted him down for weapons, and I could see there's like a wallet or something,
Yeah.
and I could
Yeah.
see him going like that, and he had a big heavy coat on, and he just wasn't moving fast enough, but.
Yeah, he was very agitated just for me being out here talking to him. But it's a little weird.
All right, so if you couldn't hear that, if you watch the full video, what ends up happening is Ahmaud's just kind of hanging out in his car. Cops come upon him. He's really irritated. He's in his car. He says, "I just got off work. I'm just blowing off some steam. Leave me alone," basically. And the one cop who shows up on the scene says, "All right, I got to check you for weapons. Hang on." And you know, he's super irritated, and I don't blame him. Any interaction with law enforcement is usually not pleasant. So he's irritated. The cops are in his business, and he says, "All right, look, check me for weapons." Apparently, I don't have the other video, or maybe I do. Let's see. And
Turn around, put your hands on the car. Turn around, put your hands on the car. I'm checking you for weapons. I'm checking you for weapons.
You got no reason to touch me, bro.
I'm not searching you. I'm checking you for weapons. All right, man. Listen, man.
What you talking about?
I'm not here to ruin your day.
My job.
Oh.
What? Don't go on my motherfucking car.
I'm not going to your car.
Don't
Back
go-
up.
Bro, don't touch me, bro. You can't touch
Listen.
me, bro. Don't touch my car and don't touch me.
You're not allowing me to search your car?
You can't go in my.
I'm not asking you. Just don't reach the car, man.
Get your hand out of your pocket.
Hands out of your pocket.
Hand out of your pocket. Down. Warning, down.
Stay on the ground. Just stay on the ground, okay? And I'm just here to make sure everything's okay.
all right, so that's that part of the video, right? So one cop already checks him for weapons, does a job. He's got nothing on him. He's totally being compliant. He doesn't have to let them in his car. He's not under arrest. He's not. There's no probable cause for a search or anything like that I can see from this clip. And another cop just shows up on scene and just pulls out his taser and just tries to blast him. I mean, it's not funny. It's sick. But these are what these people are doing. These are what these cops are doing. Now, it's so sort of ridiculous that when the other supervisor shows up, he plays that clip and he says, "Wait a minute. Wait a minute. It got to that point? You had to tase him? What?" So, even the point of this is that, what they're trying to do here is show that Ahmaud Arbery is just a bad guy. Well, look, he's got all of these other incidents. He's got a shoplifting incident. He's got this one where he's, using drugs, presumably, in the middle of the field, in the middle of the day, the middle of the morning. And he's got all this interaction with law enforcement. And there is a bit where he does get a little bit of aggressive. Ahmaud actually, you see it in that one clip. He kind of goes after that cop, like, "Get out of my car, man. Like, you're not allowed to go in there," which unless he's under arrest or unless they've got probable cause to get in there, there's all sorts of rules about what they can do in your vehicle. And he's saying you're not allowed in there. So we have another cop shows up and says, "Well, we're just going to go ahead and go ahead and tase you." And then his supervisor shows up and I said, "Wow, it got to that point? Like, you morons couldn't figure this out on your own? And so there's no crime. You smell a little burnt marijuana and you just leave him, not before you already tased him." I mean, this alone could have been some sort of a claim against them for just unreasonable enforcement. I mean, it's ridiculous what happened here. So what they're trying to do is show that this is Ahmaud being a bad guy. In my mind, from my view, he was totally compliant, right? He was angry. He was upset. No question about it. Everybody is at a traffic stop when the police are in your business. Nobody's happy about that. The cop fires the taser, says, get on the ground. You see Ahmaud just go, all right, fine. And he gets on the ground. So he's totally compliant, right? The police here showed up and diffused the situation. The McMichaels didn't. They actually escalated the situation in a way that got him killed. So the police here, arguably they screwed up a bunch of stuff with everything, but they tased him unnecessarily. Even the supervisor says, what the hell, you tased the guy? And they're putting these videos out now to sort of show that he's a bad dude. He's just a bad guy. Well, a lot of that stuff is kind of irrelevant. I talked a little bit about Rule 403. There's another rule right after that. It's called Rule 404. This comes from the federal rules of evidence. All right, these federal rules of evidence are long, they're complicated. We spend a whole semester in law school talking about them, trying to learn them and understand them. I don't want you to dive into the meat and the potatoes of this entire statute. That's not what I'm talking about. But here is what is right in first about character evidence. Okay, character evidence is talking about evidence about a person's character. That's what it means. Are you a good guy, an honest guy, a dishonest guy? Somebody who has a propensity to go commit crimes or any of those things. Well, here's what the rule says. This issue has been addressed. Can the government, can the defense, the McMichaels defense, can they bring in all of this evidence about Ahmaud? Can they say, show the jury, well, look, he shoplifted, and look, he had this incident years ago in 2017, and he brought a gun to school, and he was on probation for a period of time. Can they talk about those things, or is that prohibited? Here's what the rule says. Rule 404, character evidence, crimes or other acts. Character evidence. Prohibited uses. Evidence of a person's character or character trait is not admissible to prove that on a particular occasion the person acted in accordance with the character or trait. So what that is saying is that they can't use that past criminal activity to show that he has a propensity to go commit more crimes. They can use it to show other things potentially, but if they're going to be using evidence of that character trait to prove another character trait, so in this case that he was trespassing or that he was burglarizing the neighborhood or he was a robber or he was vandalizing things, they can't use that as other evidence. So why are they releasing these things? Why are these things even coming out in the first place? What is happening with that? We're starting to see kind of a steady stream of these videos coming out. The police departments are just scouring. They're going through all their files. Find anything with Ahmaud with his name on it that we can make him look bad on. And we see it. We saw another one. I think it just came out today, and we see this interaction. And once again, Ahmaud is totally in compliance with everything that the officers have asked of him. So let's take a quick look.
Tell me about the TV.
TV?
Mm-hmm.
What? We don't have any TV.
Well, what about the 65-inch TV?
65-inch TV.
115.
Do me a favor,
71,
and don't make this hard on yourselves. All of you take a seat.
Take a seat.
Take a
For
seat.
what? I don't know nothing about no TV.
Take
bro.
a seat.
TV? What
Take
the
a
fuck?
seat.
What
Now.
the fuck, man?
So, it's that one right there with the fur jacket. Okay. Okay. He's old enough. He's 20. The other, he's 17. These two are 15. They were inside the store, though?
Yeah,
Okay.
You went inside what?
and on the patio riding bikes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So those three trespass. Him's going to be trespassing, and we're going to take charge.
What we do? What we do?
We was just right looking at the
You
bike.
tried to roll the TV out.
Nah,
We
man,
was
I ain't
in
got no
there.
Yeah, no, that don't work, man.
I had my thing, bro. I had my receipt.
Yeah, where's it at?
My receipt was back there on the
Stay on the ground.
Yeah, where's the TV?
TV, I ain't stealing TV. TV is where y'all have it.
Yeah, I know.
Your TV is in there. I had a receipt, bro.
Where's the receipt at?
My receipt
Stay,
is in the
hey, I didn't stay seated.
I got money,
You know what?
bro.
You know what?
I'm not a bro.
I want you to lay on your stomach. Lay on your stomach.
I'm not laying on
Lay on your stomach.
So which one of you guys want
Lay on your stomach. You're under arrest.
to
You're under arrest for shoplifting.
Stop, man.
Yeah, you have the
I
right
did
to.
not steal no TV, bro.
You have the right to remain silent.
When
Anything
y'all
you
see
say
my
can
money,
be used
y'all
against
gonna
you in a court of law. You have the right to speak to an attorney and have an attorney present during any questioning. If any time you can't afford an attorney, won't be provided for your government expense.
What you trying to do?
It's called shoplifting when.
All right. Yeah, enough of that. So again, the cops show up and he is in total compliance. He sits down, he lawfully, you know, in compliance. He follows the orders. He stands up. The officer doesn't like it, and he places him under arrest. So again, the cops showed up and diffused the situation. What I think is happening here is that these cops are actually showing up or releasing these videos in an effort to really cast him in a bad light. You have to imagine that everything that's going on in Brunswick right now, that everybody who's living in the proximity of where this case is happening is just being bombarded with this news. You and I are watching this because, you know, I'm in Arizona. I'm 2,000 miles away from where all this happened. But the people who are living in this community are glued to this like nothing you've ever seen, because this is all happening right in their backyard. So when law enforcement is releasing these videos showing that, or I don't know where they're coming from, but somebody's releasing them. Why are they releasing them? Why are they digging through them? Is this journalists? Is this law enforcement? What's going on with this? But why are they doing it? In my mind, they're just, the only thing they're trying to do is really paint him in a bad light so that it impacts the jury. It impacts the case. When McMichaels' case goes through, he's going to get all sorts of special privileges, just guessing based on other cases I've seen. And what they're trying to do now is just craft the narrative. They're just trying to manipulate what the public opinion is about Ahmaud. This case, this arrest, this shoplifting charge, the one that we just watched previously on the side of the road, again, it has nothing to do with the case. It has nothing to do with what happened on that one particular day. It's all irrelevant. But what they're trying to do is craft the narrative. They're trying to release these things so that when the people come in, they are predisposed to just say, you know what, McMichaels are right. He deserved it. He was a lifelong criminal. What do we care if we let these guys off the hook? So that's, it's very bad. I think it's a very unfortunate thing that's happening. I don't think that the fact, he may have been a bad dude. I don't know him. But the point is, there's no evidence that exists to justify the arrest, or justify the shooting and killing of him based on something that was not even criminal activity. All right. So I think I made that point. Now, I've been doing a pretty good job, I think, decimating the arguments, or not a good job, I don't know. But I think the arguments are very bad that we've covered thus far. On the other side, there's some things that I'm seeing that I just don't think are appropriate. And a lot of it is the language that we're seeing about, in particular, a lot of the racial animosity, the racial bias that exists. I don't think it is useful, predominantly because I don't think that it is based on any evidence. And again, this is an evidence type of thing. Everybody wants to jump to hyperbole. Everywhere we go, everybody's rushing to one side or the other. You know, the McMichaels were racist white supremacists. There's not really any evidence of that. On the other side, it was that Ahmaud was somebody who never did anything wrong, and he was just jogging in the middle of the streets. He was in the middle of the road, and all this happened. And so everybody's just kind of manipulating things to serve their arguments. Something that, the word that I've been seeing thrown around a lot, which I think is just unfair, and I don't think it's productive, I think it's hyperbole, is this idea of lynching. Okay, and this is something that one of our presidential candidates actually brought up. Now, his public statement was a little bit different than his private, or his also public statement, but to a different audience. So the audience is changing. The statement is changing based on the audience, and it's hyperbole. And I don't think it serves any interests at all other than to sort of inflame people, cause people to have a lot of emotions. And so I want to say that's a bad argument. Let's talk about lynching. Here we got a statement from Joe Biden. Joe Biden's running for president, and on Twitter, he released a statement. The video is clear. Ahmaud Arbery was killed in cold blood. My heart goes out to his family, who deserve justice and deserve it now. It is time for a swift, full, and transparent investigation into his murder, which is not a bad statement. I mean, I agree with a lot of that. I do think his family is owed justice, and he deserves justice, and a full and transparent investigation is something I am completely in favor of. I wish it would have happened a lot sooner. I covered this ad nauseum last week about the 3 different prosecutors who were assigned on the case, the 3 different prosecutors who didn't do anything on the case until the video went public. Then suddenly they're out at the gates. Well, and then they not even actually. Then they turned it over to the grand jury. They didn't even have the guts to make the decision themselves, because it would have countermanded what they were doing previously. So they turn it over to a grand jury. The grand jury does the indictment, and the public is up in arms. So Joe Biden makes one statement to the public, And then he makes a different statement when he's talking to a group of African American people, and he uses the word lynching twice. And I just don't think that is a very productive word to be using. I'm sure there are going to be many people who disagree with that, but I just don't think it helps us answer any questions, or it doesn't serve the interest of justice to start phrasing things this way. Let's take a look at that clip.
Many of us have seen that harrowing footage of Ahmaud Arbery and out on a jog on a beautiful day in February in Florida and in Georgia, shot down in cold blood, a sense lynched before our very eyes, 2020 style, lynched so plainly, unmistakably, without mercy.
Yeah, so the word lynching is something that has a lot of really a very, very pejorative connotation to it, and rightfully so, right? This was something. The word lynching, if you look it up in a dictionary, it's basically what happened here. There was a mob group who chased him down and executed their form of justice on him without any due process at all. So I'm not particularly concerned about the official definition of it, but it is concerning when he has one set of words for the public and then uses a different set of words to an African American community, because the word lynching goes back to the earliest foundations of our entire country. There's a lot of pain around that. There's a lot of hurt, a lot of hardship, and it's pejorative in the sense that this is something that was happening to African American people, to black people all over our country, where white people who were, in a position where they thought that they had superior rights were going and executing their form of justice against the African American community, which many times resulted in death and hangings and all of those things. So basically what he's doing is he's taking that language from a bygone era, one that we all want to put behind us and get beyond us, and he's applying it in this case. Now, I just don't think that's productive at all. I think it's going to inflame the situation more. I think it's bad language to use. I understand why he's doing it. He's on with a number of people who are going to respond to that type of language. It's persuasive to them. It may be exactly what they want to hear, but is that really what happened? Was this a white supremacy thing against an African American young kid? There's, of course, going to be people who say that it is, but again, I don't see any evidence of that. Do we have any evidence that Travis and Gregory woke up one day and just said, let's go find and murder and kill a black kid who's in our neighborhood? I haven't seen that. Is there any evidence that they're a part of any white supremacy group? Do they have prior statements about being white supremacists? Do they have a history of racial bias or animosity? I don't know. I would be very curious to know. And part of what I would like to see is Gregory McMichaels' personnel file. Does he have a history of complaints? Does he have complaints from other African Americans or Hispanics or other minorities? Is he somebody who has a history of singling these people out? If he does, then certainly that becomes a better statement, right? That this was a racially operated, racially biased lynching. If there's evidence of that, then I can buy into that claim, but I just haven't seen any of it yet. And so when we start jumping to conclusions and we start doing mind reading and we start presuming to know people's motives, that really muddles up the case and it unnecessarily inflames people. Okay, we don't need to make this case about race. This case was, I'm sure it is, there's without any question there is a racial component. If this was a white kid, would this have happened? Absolutely not. These guys were hungry to go find somebody and they did. But my point is, do we need to use that sort of racial language to the extent that Joe Biden did? I just don't think so. I think it overly inflames things, and it's just not necessary. This case is bad enough on its face. It's really bad. The police were totally, the former police, the McMichaels, were totally out of line. The prosecutors who were investigating the case dropped the ball multiple times, and I think they were actually engaged in a deliberate type of cover-up to make sure this all gets swept under the rug. Had that defense attorney not leaked the video, we would have never heard about this. So I think it's a bad argument. To use that sort of hyperbole is a bad argument. Okay, again, another argument against sort of Arbery was this case, the idea that he was just out on a jog. Again, this doesn't serve any purposes. They just want to say he was out on a jog, he wasn't doing anything bad. When we watch the video here, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it doesn't look like a jog. It looks like he's actually just sprinting down the road. And so, it's when Ahmaud's side, when the side, and I'm on this side, I certainly think, I believe he is the victim here, 100% without any question. He's the victim. His family's the victim. You know, the entire community's the victim, because what we're seeing here is really bad prosecutorial decisions. But when we start sort of tweaking our story around a little bit to say, oh no, he was just on a jog, he was just getting exercise, that is also not accurate, and that undermines our side's credibility. So when I see our side out there saying, well, he was just jogging, and you know, this was all a racial thing and all this stuff, it's like, guys, the evidence isn't there to support that. It doesn't look like just a jog to me. We can admit that. We can admit maybe he shouldn't have been in the house. Maybe he was doing something wrong. The McMichaels didn't see it. They didn't have any basis for the citizen's arrest, and they didn't have any basis in reality whatsoever in any extent of the idea that he should be shot and killed. So we don't need to spin things in order to make our case. That's my point. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people just aren't seeing that. So let's take a look at the video. And this is a new video that I had not seen last week. And we see Ahmaud, or it's Ahmaud. He's walking into a house. He's in there for a couple minutes, and then he comes sprinting out. So it's not a jog. It looks like a sprint, and he's fast, man. He is just racing down the street, which coincides with the McMichaels claim. Let's take a quick look at the video. All right, so there's no sound on this one, so I'll just kind of talk you through it. So there's Ahmaud walking into the house, and you can see the timeline here, and it's moving fast, right? Those are not seconds. Those are probably, you know, it's probably moving, I don't know, 10 seconds a second. So it's going fast. And so he goes into the residence. He pokes around for a little bit, and there's nobody outside. This security camera is looking. This is, I think, Satya Road right here. So it's on that map, Satya Road. And so he's going to come out of here and just start, you know, take off this direction. Now, any minute, any second now, we're going to see a neighbor who actually comes into view. And this is the person who's calling the police. Let's see where we're at. All right. So then he comes in. You know, just maybe a minute, 2 minutes after Ahmaud goes into the house, he calls, makes the report. We're going to wait a little bit further, and then I want you to pay attention to, you know, closely up here, because we're going to see Ahmaud then very, very quickly. Watch, boom, and he's gone. He's down the street. He's right there already. So just in a matter of a couple seconds, he's running down the street, right? And that, you know, in my mind, that does look suspicious. Okay, somebody sprinting out of the house. It looks suspicious, but it's not criminal activity. It's not a violation. He's not carrying anything out of the house. Nothing's burning in the house. He's just running down the street. Now, again, it's not a jog, but it doesn't matter. So a lot of people, you know, on the other side who are saying you're an idiot for thinking that Ahmaud was the victim here. He was the aggressor. They point to that. They say, he wasn't jogging. Therefore, your entire argument is invalid. If you are making the argument that he was jogging, then why would I listen to anything that you say? And there's some truth to that. Okay. You can't even admit, the guy was not just like happily jogging down the road with his headphones on, you know, with a Gatorade bottle. He was something was going on there. He could have been jogging previously. He could have been, you know, on this scene, but on this side of the frame before he walks into the house. He could have been jogging, and he was just taking a break and poking around a house. I've poked around many houses that were under construction, especially as a younger man. You know, it's something that's kind of fun to do. You get to go in and sort of visualize where things are going to go, and you learn how, you know, the electrical work is put in, and you look at the frames. I mean, it's interesting. That's why boys build things with Legos and stuff. You know, we like to build things and see how they're built. So he may have just been doing that. We already looked at the statute. Even if he was in the house, there's no evidence that anything was broken, no property damage. So there's no criminal trespass going on there. And he takes off and he sprints down the road. Sprinting down the road is not illegal, but it undermines our credibility when we say he was just out for a lovingly neighborly jog, because it just doesn't look like that. The video doesn't look like that. If we had a video and he was just jogging down the road, well, we wouldn't have to make this argument. But on our side, when we start making these types of claims, like it was just a simple jog, it's just not necessary, it's not productive, and it doesn't help anything. So it's a bad argument that he was just on a jog. Okay, I don't think that's true. I don't think there's any evidence that shows that is true. All right, let's go back to my pal, Stefan Molyneux. Now, this is a clip from his show. that he says something that kind of just shocked me a little bit. Let's take a quick look. He's talking about all of the other problems that Arbery had. So he's talking about the fact that he's got some mental problems and that there's a prior history of criminal activity, criminality that justifies what the McMichaels did. Let's take a listen.
When people say, oh, the police are on their way, it's a citizen's arrest, you're safe. You may be in trouble, but you're safe. Now, the thing also that troubles me about this so much is that the justice system itself failed. Because this young man, right, Ahmaud Arbery, had been in a school basketball game with a gun. He'd run. He got 5 years probation. He'd violated his probation by stealing, and nothing happened to him because there are these reports of his mental illnesses or mental issues and so on, which are kind of contradicted by other people and so on, but nothing happened to them. So why was it so important for Gregory and Travis McMichael to grab their weapons before going to perform the citizen's arrest on Ahmaud Arbery? Well, because Gregory McMichael had been part of the investigation into Ahmaud Arbery in the past, which means he knew everything about the young man. He knew about his history, his weapons charges, he knew about the shoplifting, he knew about the violation of probation, and therefore he knew that the young man could be armed and dangerous since he'd had a weapons charge in the past.
Okay, so a number of different problems with that, right? A number of them we've already talked about. One is propensity. Because he had those things in the past, did he have them currently? It's propensity. Is it likely? Maybe. Does it give you any lawful basis to do anything about that? No. In the rules, you can't presume that because somebody did something in the past that they're doing something currently or that they will do something in the future. That's trying to be predictive, and we can't do that. This is not Minority Report. We don't get to think people are guilty for thought crimes or for future crimes. There's no basis for that, right? And Stephan says because Gregory Michael had been so involved, he knew Arbery so well, he knew everything about the young man, his history, his weapons charges, shoplifting violations. He knew that young man. He knew he could be armed, and he had been armed in the past. So, first of all, I mean, did the McMichaels know that was Arbery? Did they know that? If they knew that, so if we just accept Stephan's point that they knew that, shouldn't they have reported that? Shouldn't they have called the police and said, hey, we know exactly who this guy is. It's Ahmaud Arbery. I know that because I was working on past cases. I've seen these video footages. I've seen, enough of it. I knew who it was. If he knew that he also had a weapon such that he needed to go get his own guns, doesn't that mean he should have called the police that much more? He's not a cop anymore. He's not even an investigator anymore. He's retired. He's got no lawful authority to do any of that. If he had those concerns, why didn't he just call the police and file a report? Why does that justify him having to go and get his gun and do it on his own? We know that the police were there within a matter of minutes. We knew that they showed up right on scene right after the shooting occurred. They could have just been hands off. They could have followed Ahmaud a little bit, for another couple minutes, and the police would have been there. But they got out of their car with their guns blazing, and they went and shot and killed him. There's no evidence that McMichaels knew anything about him. On the call, on the police report, they said it was a black guy in a white shirt hauling ass down Satia Road. So there's no evidence at all that Gregory McMichael knew who he was, had any reason to believe that he was armed. No evidence of that. It's a really bad argument. It's jumping to conclusions based on evidence that is based on facts that are not in evidence. There's just nothing there to support that claim. All right. Quickly, last bad argument I think that we have, and this is one that I sympathize with, that you have a right to protect your neighborhood. Okay, which I don't actually think that's a bad argument. I kind of do agree with that. I think, as a neighbor, I'm small government, less police, less overbearing rules and regulations for all of us, kind of let us live our own lives. And I understand the idea that you want to live in a safe neighborhood. You want to be somebody who is, living in a community where people are not being stolen from. And so I understand that. I get that argument. I sympathize with that, actually. It's not a bad argument. But the idea that you can go ahead and create this neighborhood watch and that you're going to be organized against crime, it's such that you get to go and enforce it on your own. You get to play police officer is an insane extension of that argument. We all want to live in safe neighborhoods. We all don't want crimes being committed against us, against our family, against our neighbors. That's a good argument. But the idea that you get to organize these roving bands of vigilantes who are going to go and just take law into their own hands is lunacy. Nobody wants to live in that type of neighborhood. They want to live in a neighborhood where they're free to live and let others live, in my mind. That's the type of neighborhood that I want to live in. Okay, so now let's think about it. The reason this is a bad argument, the reason why the people who are saying that the McMichaels had a right to just do whatever they wanted and they had the ability to go in and chase Ahmaud down, here's why that doesn't work. It's actually counterintuitive. So I'm a defense lawyer, criminal law. I've done trials, and we represent, as my firm, we represent thousands of people, over the course of our place in business. When we review cases, what you want to think about are what we call themes. What is going to be the theme of the trial? What is going to be the theme of the case? The theme of the defense? Because you have to have a coherent theme. You have to have a logical sort of progression of what your arguments are going to look like, and you organize that around the theme. And what's the theme going to be in this case for the prosecutor's office? This is where all of these different bad arguments sort of stack up, and we can wrap them all into place, because we know that the defense, which is the side that I'm normally on, I'm normally representing people like the McMichaels. Nothing actually, we never represented anybody quite like that. But those people who are charged with crimes, those are our clients. And so we're normally thinking from the defense side. This case has given me the opportunity to put on my prosecutor hat and kind of go at it from a different angle. So if I'm thinking through this as a prosecutor, what is my theme going to be? What is the theme? How does it work? When you go to law school and you go through a trial practice class, they tell you, a good way to structure this is to go in what they call triads. So you have a series of 3. And when I was thinking about this in this case, and okay, how would I approach this if I were a prosecutor and I'm dissecting all of these different bad arguments back to back to back, and I've got to make opening arguments in front of a jury, and I've got to convince them that the McMichaels are in fact guilty of murder. It may not be intentional murder, but reckless murder, felony murder. Those are murder charges also. If I have to present my case, what does that look like? And so I wanted to just, when I was thinking through it, it reminded me of this old clip from Seinfeld, where you've got Jackie Childs, who is the attorney that Kramer uses, and he is doing the triad. So this is something, I watched the Seinfeld series before I ever went to law school, but he does the triad, and it's pretty funny. Let's take a quick look at this clip for a little comic relief. All right, 1 second.
It's outrageous, egregious, preposterous. It's definitely preposterous.
So you see what he did there? He did the 3, egregious, outrageous, preposterous. And when I was thinking about this, I'm thinking, okay, so what is a good theme here? How do we wrap all of these bad arguments into a theme that we can present to the court? Before I get there, I want to show you one final thing that I had not seen. Actually, Faith pulled this up when she was helping me prep for today. Here is a text message from an officer to a homeowner, is what it looks like. All right, let's take a quick look. It says, here's a clip from my Blink camera. So these are people who are communicating back and forth. Your neighbor at Blank Satia Avenue is Greg McMichael. Greg is a retired law enforcement, retired investigator from DA's office. He said, please call him day or night. When you get action on your camera, his number is that number. And so you've got these different people in this neighborhood who are basically coordinating to capture this elusive person. You've got people saying to other people, other neighbors, hey, we've got a former investigator from the DA's office here. We've got a former police officer here. So let's put him in charge of this orchestrating of capturing whoever this criminal person is. And when you add that in there, and when you start thinking about all of these neighbors kind of communicating together, everybody sending stuff over to McMichaels, it starts to look a lot more like this whole thing is being just absolutely premeditated. Like they are They are empowering the McMichaels to do something about this. And the McMichaels now have this inflated sense of duty and that they're going to go and they're going to enforce justice for the entire neighborhood, which is obviously, a problem, because here, what ended up happening is now we have a dead young man as a result of their botched law enforcement. So when I started thinking about, okay, what does the theme look like here? Some words came to mind. When I was putting together the map and sort of going through those other different arguments. What if the prosecutor came out and they started their sort of recitation of the facts, and they said, these guys were out there chasing. We're going to do the triad. They were out there chasing this man. They were pursuing him on a number of different streets. They saw him running. They went down Satia. They went down Buford. They went up to Holmes. They blockaded him multiple times. They had all these different text messages with people. They went and they got their guns. They chased him. They pursued him. And then the word is they hunted him. That's the theme of the case. They hunted Ahmaud Arbery. And there's a lot of evidence to show that this was more analogous to a hunt, to a chase. They chased him for 4 or 5 minutes around those streets. They were in a roving gang, and they had Roddy blocking him off on one street. They had Travis blocking him off on the other street. And then Travis, Arbery's running around. So these guys are pursuing him. They're chasing him all over the neighborhood. They've got this entire orchestrated event to go and capture this guy. And it feels to me like a bit of a hunt. And so if you weave that into the theme of your case, that's an impactful thing for a jury to hear, and something that a lot of people can sympathize with. So when we start to see all of this evidence of them releasing these videos of the tasing incident, of the shoplifting incident, when they're showing the security footage of him coming in and out, all they're doing is justifying the fact that Ahmaud was in total compliance with law enforcement in previous incidents. He's been dealt with before with law enforcement. He may have had mental problems. He may have a criminal past. He may have done something at some point that the world is not really thrilled with. But the law enforcement, the police, they dealt with it. Gregory McMichael, Travis McMichael, they chose not to involve law enforcement. If the argument is that they knew who he was and what a bad guy he was, shouldn't they have called law enforcement? Shouldn't they have waited a few more minutes until they arrived? But they didn't. Why? Because they were on a hunt. Because they were empowered by their neighbors to go and get that black kid, to go and get this hooligan who's running around our neighborhood, who doesn't belong here, who is a criminal. And they put together a plan. They knew immediately. They were waiting for him. Gregory walked into the house where Travis was, and he said, "Get your gun, son. There's somebody hauling ass down Satia Boulevard." He did. They had a plan. They all had their guns. They all got in their trucks. Roddy, the neighbor, was on call. They were on high alert to go on this chase, to pursue this kid, to do the hunt, to go and capture their prey. And they did that. They shot him. They killed him. And they had no legal basis, no justification to do that. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we ask that you find them guilty of murder, felony murder, second-degree murder, whatever the murder statutes are in Georgia, and you ask the jury to convict on that. So every time that these police officers release more videos or they try to paint him in a bad light, all they're doing is bolstering the claim from the prosecutor's office that, hey, they really acted out of ordinary. The McMichaels really blew this whole thing, and they should be held responsible for their activities. You don't get to go run around your neighborhood with guns and shoot people. You just don't get to do it. So I sympathize with the idea that they want to protect their neighborhood, but the way they went about it and the way that they crafted this entire hunt of Ahmaud is horrendous. And in order for justice to be served, those guys have to be held accountable. And quite frankly, the prosecutors have to be held accountable. There were 3 of them who kicked this thing down the road a number of different times. They did nothing as a result of what they saw. They saw the same video that you or I saw. They just sat on it for 2 months. They didn't do anything. They just sat on it. And it's very concerning. Thankfully, the video was leaked, and thankfully, we're starting to see a little bit of some progress on the case. And I just want to leave with a couple quick things. You know, one more time in memory of Ahmaud Arbery, who was taken from the world much too young. I know a little bit about that. I've had people in my life taken from me too young, and I empathize with the family. I empathize with the people who are suffering today. Quick reminder, these are the two camps that we talked about last week. We have everybody on the traditional left who are calling everybody racist murderers, and they're saying he's guilty. We've got everybody on the other side who are saying this is legitimate, this is self-defense. They're totally innocent, they're totally justified, that everything was okay, everything was kosher. Guys like Stefan, guys like the comment that I clipped at the beginning of the show. Everything's all well and good. I would encourage you, okay, as I went through today, I think like 6 or 7 arguments, there are bad arguments from both sides, stuff that is unhelpful. What I'm most interested in is making sure that we do not lose sight of what really is important in this case, which is this has a lot to do with really bad popo. Really, really bad popo. We've got bad former officers. We've got bad prosecutors who were involved in the case. There's a lot of politics going on around this situation, but it really just boils down to this is injustice happening in our justice system without any question about it. As soon as the public caught wind of the video, we started to see some action on the case. But had the public not seen that, this entire thing would have been swept under the rug without any shadow of a doubt. Would have all been just pushed aside, and the system would have kept going forward, and they would have gotten away with literal murder, which is a scary thought that happens. But I know it happens because I see it. I see police, I see prosecutors, I see judges, I see politicians, I see everybody get away with a lot of very bad things. We have a lot of very bad people masquerading as the good guys. Remember when you were a kid and you played cops and robbers and you wanted to be the cop because the cop was the good guy? The secret is many of them are on the same side. They're both on the same side. And we have to make sure that we as a people are holding them accountable. We want to increase the conversation. We want to increase the transparency in our justice system. We want real reform. We're coming up on an election. We have a lot of people running for office who have the power to make some changes. But it requires that the people, the citizens who are doing the voting, the people, you and I who are going into the voting booths, we talk about these issues because this is our justice system. And if our justice system falters and we lose faith in it because we can't trust prosecutors to enact it, then the entire system is going to crumble. Everything is going to fall, and it's going to not be a good system for society. Things will get out of control, and we certainly don't want to see that happen. So I want to thank you one more time for being a part of this broadcast. That's all that I have for you today. If you're watching, we've got 20 something people here on YouTube and others on Facebook. Thank you for being here. Super excited that you're here. And I would ask you to go ahead and subscribe because we're going to continue these conversations. When there's new information, when new stuff comes to light, we'll talk about it right here on this show. Same time, same place. Can't wait to see you next week. One more plug for my brand new book, Beginning to Winning, How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. Literally, I just got this printed copy today. I'm super excited about it. It's on Amazon. It has nothing to do with Ahmaud Arbery's case, but it's really written for people who've been charged with crimes and who need a framework to help them through the process. So if you're interested, check that out on Amazon. Otherwise, folks, have a wonderful night. I will see you here next week. Thanks for tuning in.